Darius Jackson stood frozen in the crowded aisle as flight attendants and passengers stared. The plane's intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight is delayed indefinitely due to unforeseen circumstances." The CEO's face turned crimson. He never imagined a Harvard-educated lawyer would bring an entire airline to its knees. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice and standing up against discrimination, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories like this. Now let's learn how a simple flight turned into a powerful moment that changed corporate America forever. Darius Jackson checked his Rolex watch as he strode through Chicago O'Hare International Airport. At 38, he had already achieved more than most attorneys accomplish in a lifetime. His tailored navy Armani suit fit his athletic frame perfectly, complementing his deep brown skin and closely cropped hair with precisely lined edges. The leather briefcase in his right hand contained meticulously prepared documents for tomorrow's high-stakes case in New York. As a senior partner at Wilson Bennett and Associates, Darius had earned a reputation as the go-to attorney for impossible cases. Tomorrow's hearing represented his most important challenge yet, defending Jackson Williams Technologies, a black-owned tech firm, against a predatory takeover attempt by a corporate giant. The case had consumed his every waking hour for weeks, with Darius poring over financial statements and precedent-setting cases until the early morning hours. Despite graduating at the top of his class from Howard University and earning his law degree from Harvard with highest honors, Darius still battled persistent imposter syndrome. Each victory in the courtroom temporarily quieted the voice in his head that whispered he didn't truly belong in the elite circles he now navigated. That same voice reminded him that his mistakes would be judged more harshly than those of his white colleagues. Final boarding call for Flight 1857 to New York LaGuardia. The announcement echoed through the terminal, interrupting his thoughts. Darius quickened his pace, reaching the gate just as the attendant was preparing to close the door. "I apologize for cutting it close," he said, handing over his first-class ticket. The gate agent glanced at his ticket, then back at him with a slightly furrowed brow. "First class is boarding through the other entrance, sir." "Are you sure this is your ticket?" Darius maintained his professional smile, though this was a familiar occurrence. "Yes, 3A. That's my assigned seat." She examined the ticket again, her expression shifting to one of mild surprise. "Of course, Mr. Jackson. Have a pleasant flight." As he walked down the jet bridge, Darius pulled out his phone to make a quick call home. "Daddy." His 7-year-old daughter Maya's voice instantly melted away his frustration. "Are you on the airplane already?" "Almost, sunshine. Just wanted to say goodnight to you and your brother before takeoff." "Mommy says you're fighting for justice tomorrow," Maya said, with the earnestness only children possess. Darius smiled. His wife Amara had a way of explaining his work that maintained its importance without burdening their children with the complexities. "That's right. I'm helping good people keep what they've worked hard to build." After speaking briefly with his 10-year-old son Marcus and assuring Amara he had double-checked that his speech was packed, Darius ended the call as he reached the aircraft door. The flight attendant greeting passengers smiled professionally. "Welcome aboard. First class is to your left." Darius nodded and made his way to seat 3A, storing his briefcase in the overhead compartment before settling into the comfortable leather seat. He released a deep breath, finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion from working 80-hour weeks. The past month had been particularly grueling, with late nights and missed family dinners becoming the norm rather than the exception. As he fastened his seatbelt, Darius reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Growing up in Southside Chicago, attending Harvard had seemed an impossible dream. Now preparing to defend a landmark case that could set precedent for minority-owned businesses nationwide, he felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The memory of his morning security experience flashed through his mind. The random TSA screening that somehow always seemed to select him. The subtle questions about his first-class ticket. The careful modulation of his tone to avoid being perceived as aggressive when asking reasonable questions. These were the invisible taxes he paid daily, regardless of his achievements or status. Darius closed his eyes, determined to use the flight to catch up on much-needed rest before tomorrow's battle in the courtroom. For a precious few hours, he could relax in his rightfully purchased seat, gathering strength for what lay ahead. As the remaining passengers filed past him toward economy, Darius allowed himself to drift toward sleep, completely unaware of the storm about to engulf him. Regina Palmer moved efficiently through the first-class cabin, her 15 years of experience as a flight attendant evident in her polished professionalism. She paused at Darius's seat. "Good evening, Mr. Jackson. May I offer you a pre-departure beverage?" Darius opened his eyes, appreciating the respectful tone that wasn't always extended to him in service interactions. "Sparkling water would be perfect, thank you." "Of course." Regina smiled warmly before continuing her preparations. The boarding process proceeded normally. Business travelers settled into their seats, tucking away laptops and briefcases. A young couple celebrating their anniversary toasted with complimentary champagne. The predictable choreography of a routine flight unfolded without incident until a commotion at the entrance disrupted the calm. "I don't care about your boarding procedures. Do you have any idea who I am?" The booming voice carried throughout the cabin, causing heads to turn. Walter Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Industries, stood in the doorway, his imposing 6'3" frame blocking the entry. His tailored Italian suit and monogrammed cufflinks screamed old money and entitlement. Behind him, a harried assistant struggled with Montgomery's carry-on luggage while balancing a leather portfolio. "Sir, I understand you're a valued customer, but we board by zones for everyone's convenience," the gate agent explained meekly. Montgomery's face flushed with irritation. "My company spends millions with this airline annually. That should count for something." Without waiting for a response, he pushed past her into the cabin. Bradley Cooper, the head flight attendant, immediately approached. "Mr. Montgomery, welcome aboard. We weren't expecting you on this flight." "Last-minute change of plans," Montgomery replied curtly. "I need seat 3A. That's the only seat I use on this aircraft." Bradley's expression tightened. "I believe 3A is occupied, but let me check what we can do." His eyes scanned the cabin until they landed on Darius, who was reviewing documents from his briefcase, oblivious to the unfolding drama. Montgomery followed Bradley's gaze. His lips thinned into a tight line at the sight of Darius in his preferred seat. The two men moved to the galley for a hushed conversation, but their frequent glances toward Darius made the subject of their discussion obvious. After a minute of intense whispering, Bradley nodded reluctantly and approached Regina. "We need to accommodate Mr. Montgomery in 3A, he muttered. "See if you can relocate the current passenger to economy. There's an aisle seat in the exit row available." Regina's professional smile faltered. "The passenger purchased a first-class ticket. Is there another solution?" "Montgomery's our top-tier diamond member. Just handle it." Bradley walked away, leaving Regina with an uncomfortable task. She approached Darius with visible unease. "Excuse me, sir. I hate to disturb you, but we have a situation with seating. We need to ask if you would be willing to move to economy class. There's an exit row seat available with extra legroom." Darius looked up from his documents, momentarily confused. "I'm sorry, but I purchased this specific seat. Is there a problem with the aircraft that requires seat reassignment?" Regina shifted uncomfortably. "No, sir. We have a VIP passenger who specifically requests this seat whenever he flies with us. We'd be happy to provide a voucher for future travel for the inconvenience." Darius glanced past Regina to where Montgomery stood, watching the interaction with poorly concealed impatience. He noticed that no other first-class passengers were being approached with similar requests. "I see," Darius said carefully. Has everyone in first class been asked to potentially move, or am I the only one? Before Regina could answer, Montgomery interjected. Look, it's not complicated. I need that seat. You'll be more comfortable with your own people back in economy anyway. A hush fell over the first-class cabin. Regina's eyes widened at the blatantly racist comment, while Darius's expression remained carefully neutral, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sir, I have a confirmed reservation for this seat, Darius stated, calmly retrieving his boarding pass. I paid for first class, and I intend to remain in first class. Montgomery's face darkened. Do you know who I am? He demanded. I don't believe we've had the pleasure, Darius replied evenly. Walter Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Industries. I'm the reason this airline stays in business. Montgomery turned to Bradley. This is ridiculous. I've never had this problem before. Why are some passengers so difficult? The coded language wasn't lost on Darius or the other passengers within earshot. An older white woman across the aisle looked down uncomfortably. A middle-aged Asian man pretended to be absorbed in his magazine. No one intervened as Montgomery continued his barely veiled racist comments about people who don't know their place and the entitlement of some folks these days. Tension filled the cabin as Darius sat perfectly still, his Harvard Law degree and senior partner status suddenly invisible in the face of Montgomery's privileged indignation. The confrontation teetered on the edge of escalation, with Montgomery's rising voice drawing attention from passengers still boarding through the main cabin. Is there a problem here? A flight attendant from economy class poked her head into the first-class section, concerned about the commotion. No problem, Montgomery said with a dismissive wave. Just someone who needs to learn how things work in the real world. Darius remained composed, though the veins in his temples pulsed with controlled anger. He had worked too hard and overcome too many barriers to be displaced by entitlement and bigotry. As Montgomery continued his tirade, Darius made a silent decision. This would not be yet another indignity he quietly absorbed for the sake of peace. The standoff intensified as other passengers reacted to the unfolding drama. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Others stared openly, their expressions ranging from embarrassment to morbid fascination. A few shot sympathetic glances toward Darius. In Seat 2C, Zoe Williams, a social media influencer with 3 million followers, discreetly positioned her phone to capture the interaction. At 29, with her distinctive purple-streaked hair and keen eye for viral content, she recognized the significance of what was transpiring. She angled her device carefully, ensuring she captured both Darius's composed demeanor and Montgomery's increasingly agitated state. "This is completely unacceptable," Montgomery declared, his voice carrying throughout the cabin. "I want to speak to the captain immediately." Bradley nodded obsequiously. "I'll get him for you right away, Mr. Montgomery." He hurried toward the cockpit, leaving Regina standing awkwardly beside Darius's seat. "I apologize for the disturbance," she whispered to Darius, genuine regret in her eyes. "You're just doing your job," Darius replied quietly. "This isn't your fault." Captain James Reynolds emerged from the cockpit moments later, his authoritative presence temporarily quieting the commotion. His gray hair and weathered face projected experience and command. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his gaze moving between Montgomery and Darius. Montgomery stepped forward immediately. "Captain, I'm Walter Montgomery, Diamond member for 15 years. I specifically require Seat 3A for medical reasons, and this, gentleman, is refusing to accommodate a reasonable request." Captain Reynolds turned to Darius with a look that made his bias clear before he'd spoken a word. "Sir, if Mr. Montgomery needs this specific seat, I'm sure we can find you a comfortable alternative." Darius felt the familiar internal struggle stand his ground and risk being labeled an angry black man or acquiesce to avoid conflict. He'd faced this choice countless times before, in courtrooms, board meetings, and everyday interactions. This time, however, something deep inside refused to bend. "Captain Reynolds," Darius began, his voice measured, and professional. I understand Mr. Montgomery's preference, but I have a confirmed reservation for this seat, which I purchased specifically for this flight. Federal aviation regulations prohibit discriminatory treatment of passengers based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, or ancestry. The captain's expression hardened. No one is discriminating against you, sir. This is a simple courtesy request. Then I respectfully ask why I'm the only passenger being asked to move when there are 7 other first-class passengers who could equally accommodate Mr. Montgomery's preference, Darius countered. Montgomery's face flushed darker. This is ridiculous. I've never had this problem with other passengers. Some people just don't understand how the world works. I understand perfectly how the world should work, Darius replied calmly. Equal treatment under the law is not just my profession, it's my right as an American citizen. The revelation that Darius was a lawyer caused a subtle shift in Captain Reynolds' demeanor, though his irritation remained evident. Sir, as captain, I have authority over all aspects of this flight, including seating assignments when necessary. With respect, Captain, your authority does not supersede federal anti-discrimination laws, Darius stated. If you're suggesting I should move because of Mr. Montgomery's preference, rather than any legitimate operational need, I'm concerned about the legal implications for both you personally and the airline. Captain Reynolds' jaw tightened. He turned to Bradley and whispered something. Bradley nodded and reached for the cabin phone. I'm calling airport security, the captain announced. We can't have disruptive passengers delaying our departure. Darius maintained his composure despite the escalation. Captain, I've been nothing but respectful. If recording devices review this interaction, they'll show Mr. Montgomery creating the disturbance while I remain seated with my seatbelt fastened as required during boarding. Zoe's phone continued recording, capturing every word of the exchange. Several other passengers had begun filming as well, recognizing the injustice unfolding before them. Darius reached for his phone. I need to make a few calls before this situation deteriorates further. He dialed his law firm's managing partner, Lawrence Bennett, and briefly explained the situation. They're doing what Lawrence's incredulous voice was loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Put me on speaker. Darius complied as 2 airport security officers entered the cabin, directed by Bradley toward Darius's seat. Gentlemen, Lawrence's authoritative voice rang out from the phone. I'm Lawrence Bennett, managing partner at Wilson Bennett & Associates. My colleague Darius Jackson is being unlawfully singled out. Before you take any action, be advised that we represent 4 board members of this airline, and any discriminatory treatment will result in immediate legal consequences for all involved parties. The security officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly recognizing they had walked into a situation more complex than described. The older officer, a black man named Officer Williams, according to his badge, studied the scene carefully. Sir, he addressed Darius, can you explain what happened here? Before Darius could respond, Montgomery interjected. This is absurd. I'm being delayed because this man won't cooperate with a simple request. Officer Williams held up his hand. Sir, I need to hear from everyone involved. One at a time, please. Darius succinctly described the events, maintaining his professional demeanor throughout. When he finished, Officer Williams turned to Regina for confirmation. Is this accurate? Was this gentleman specifically asked to move while others in first class were not approached? Regina hesitated, glancing nervously between Bradley Montgomery and Captain Reynolds before answering. Yes, that's correct. Officer Williams nodded thoughtfully. Captain, unless this passenger has violated federal aviation regulations, we have no grounds to remove him from the aircraft. This is outrageous, Montgomery sputtered. Do you know who I am? Sir, your identity doesn't change the applicable laws, Officer Williams replied evenly. Everyone on this aircraft has equal rights regardless of status. Darius addressed the officers directly. For the record, I'd appreciate the names and badge numbers of everyone involved in this incident. The simple request sent a clear message this would not be brushed aside or forgotten. As Darius recorded the information in his phone, the power dynamic had unmistakably shifted. What began as an attempt to displace him had transformed into a documentation of potential civil rights violations with multiple witnesses and video evidence supporting his position. Montgomery's face contorted with fury as he realized his authority was being challenged successfully. His next strategy emerged from a place of desperation and entitlement. He would attempt to publicly humiliate the man who dared to stand against him. "What kind of lawyer are you anyway?" Montgomery sneered, his voice deliberately loud enough for all first-class passengers to hear. "Ambulance chaser, small claims court. I employ entire legal departments with attorneys from actual top-tier schools." Darius remained impassive, refusing to take the bait. His silence only aggravated Montgomery further. "Let me guess. Affirmative action got you where you are. Some diversity quota." Montgomery continued, his thinly veiled racism becoming increasingly overt. A murmur of discomfort rippled through the cabin. Even passengers who had remained uninvolved began shifting uneasily at the CEO's ugly tactics. Montgomery pulled out his phone, making a show of dialing. "I'm personal friends with Douglas Williams, your airline's executive vice president. Let's see what he has to say about this situation." He turned away, speaking loudly enough to ensure his connection was noticed. "Douglas Walter Montgomery here. I'm having a situation on Flight 1857. Yes, someone's in my usual seat, and your staff won't resolve it. I know. Completely unacceptable service." Bradley hovered anxiously nearby, his earlier confidence visibly shaken by the security officer's refusal to remove Darius. Captain Reynolds had retreated to the cockpit, presumably to contact airline operations about the delay. From the economy section, a voice called out. All heads turned to see Terrence Washington, a middle-aged black teacher in a cardigan and glasses, standing in the aisle. This man purchased his ticket just like everyone else. The only reason he's being targeted is obvious to all of us. Montgomery covered his phone briefly. "This doesn't concern you. Return to your seat." "It concerns all of us when we witness injustice," Terrence replied firmly. "I've been flying this airline for 20 years and never seen anyone in first class ask to move for another passenger's preference." Other economy passengers began nodding and murmuring in agreement. Phones appeared throughout the cabin, recording the confrontation from multiple angles. Montgomery's complexion reddened further. He ended his call abruptly and changed tactics, approaching Darius with a forced smile. "Listen, I may have been a bit hasty. How about we make a deal? The airline will upgrade you to first class on your return flight, and I'll throw in 10,000 frequent flyer miles. All you need to do is stop making a scene and move to the exit row. It has almost the same legroom." Darius looked Montgomery directly in the eyes. "Mr. Montgomery, what you're describing is a quid pro quo arrangement to overlook discriminatory treatment. Under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the Air Carrier Access Act, airlines are prohibited from discriminating against passengers on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, or ancestry. Furthermore, 14 CFR Part 382 specifically addresses the rights of airline passengers and prohibits discriminatory removal or reseating of passengers absent legitimate safety concerns." The precision and confidence with which Darius cited the relevant laws left no doubt about his legal expertise. Montgomery's attempted humiliation had backfired spectacularly. Darius's phone rang. "Excuse me, I should take this," he said, answering the call. "Yes, Lawrence. Yes, the situation is ongoing." Lawrence's voice boomed through the speaker again. "Darius, I've spoken with Eliza Thornton and Marcus Richardson, who both sit on the airline's board. They're appalled and have contacted the CEO directly. The regional manager is on her way to the aircraft now." Montgomery's smug expression faltered as he realized the corporate hierarchy he'd tried to leverage was turning against him. Within minutes, Patricia Davis, the airline's regional manager, boarded the aircraft. Dressed in a crisp business suit with the airline's logo pin on her lapel, she scanned the cabin with a practiced customer service smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We're working to resolve this matter as quickly as possible." She approached Darius and Montgomery, lowering her voice. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately in the jetway. I prefer to remain seated with my seatbelt fastened, as required during boarding," Darius replied calmly. "Additionally, given the nature of what's transpired, I believe transparency serves everyone's interests." Patricia nodded stiffly. "Mr. Jackson, we sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding. Of course, you may remain in your assigned seat. Mr. Montgomery, we have another first-class seat available in 5C, or we'd be happy to rebook you on the next flight to New York." Montgomery's face darkened. "This is how you treat your most valuable customers. I spend millions with this airline." "Sir, we value all our customers equally," Patricia replied, the practice line sounding particularly pointed given the circumstances. Darius spoke up. "Miss Davis, I'd appreciate written documentation regarding why I specifically was asked to relocate when other first-class passengers weren't approached. I'm concerned about the pattern this represents." Patricia's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing the anxiety beneath. "I assure you, this was an isolated incident, not reflective of our policies." "Then you won't object to providing that in writing," Darius countered smoothly. The standoff had reached a critical juncture. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. "What do you think about Darius's response to this situation? Comment number 1, if you believe he was right to stand his ground, or number 2, if you think he should have moved to avoid conflict." Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories about people fighting against discrimination. Has something similar ever happened to you on a flight? Share your experience in the comments below. So what happens when an entire plane full of passengers starts recording this blatant discrimination? And how will the airline respond when they realize they've picked the wrong passenger to mess with? Let's continue with this incredible story. While Patricia attempted to manage the situation, on the aircraft, events beyond her control were already unfolding in the digital sphere. Zoe Williams, her purple-streaked hair falling forward as she focused on her phone, had been live-streaming the entire confrontation to her millions of followers. The hashtag number #FirstClassWhileBlack was trending within minutes, accompanied by clips of Montgomery's most offensive comments. "This is absolutely unbelievable," Zoe narrated quietly as she filmed. "A successful black professional is being asked to give up his rightfully purchased seat simply because a CEO wants it. Watch how composed he remains despite the blatant discrimination." Her followers responded with outrage, sharing the video across multiple platforms. Within 30 minutes, the incident had been picked up by several online news outlets, their breaking news alerts pushing the story to an even wider audience. The airline's social media team, caught completely unprepared, scrambled to respond to thousands of angry comments flooding their accounts. Their initial generic statement about investigating the situation only fueled further criticism. Inside the aircraft, passengers from economy class had begun moving forward to the first-class divider, offering their own recordings as evidence. A college student who had captured Montgomery's "more comfortable with your own people" comment approached Darius. "Sir, I have the whole thing on video, including when he made that racist comment. I'm happy to send it to you if it helps." Darius thanked him, providing his email address. Similar offers came from multiple passengers, creating an impromptu support network throughout the aircraft. On his phone, Darius saw text messages pouring in from colleagues, friends, and even opposing counsel who had spotted the viral videos. His Howard University alumni group had already mobilized, with several civil rights attorneys offering their services pro bono. A particularly meaningful message came from Benjamin Harris, his mentor since law school. Proud of you for standing firm. This is exactly why we need black excellence in visible positions. Let me know if you need anything. Montgomery's reality was simultaneously imploding as he received urgent calls from his company's board members. A corporation already facing criticism for lack of diversity couldn't afford its CEO being caught on camera making racist remarks. Montgomery Industries' stock had begun to slide as traders anticipated the fallout. Regina approached Darius during the commotion, finding a moment of relative privacy. "Mr. Jackson," she said softly, "I want to apologize personally. I should have refused the instruction to ask you to move. 20 years in this industry and I still didn't stand up when it mattered." Darius regarded her thoughtfully. "It's difficult to challenge power structures from within." Regina nodded. "I've experienced similar treatment when I'm not in uniform. When Bradley told me to approach you specifically," she shook her head, "I knew it was wrong, but I worried about my job." Their conversation was interrupted by Captain Reynolds' voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, this flight is delayed indefinitely. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide updates as they become available." A collective groan rose from the passengers, but their frustration wasn't directed at Darius. Instead, Montgomery became the target of barely concealed glares and whispered comments. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict. Patricia's phone rang. Her face drained of color as she listened to the caller. "Yes, sir. Yes, the CEO himself. I understand the severity. Yes, sir, immediately." She ended the call and approached Darius with newly found deference. "Mr. Jackson, I've just spoken with our Chief Executive Officer. He extends his sincerest apologies and wishes to speak with you directly." The transformation was remarkable. The same airline representatives who had been willing to remove Darius less than an hour ago were now treating him with the respect they had readily shown Montgomery. Darius accepted the phone, his expression remaining neutral as he listened to the airline CEO's profuse apologies and promises of corrective action. When he handed the phone back to Patricia, the power dynamic had undeniably shifted. Montgomery, meanwhile, had retreated to the galley area, engaged in what appeared to be an increasingly desperate phone conversation with his own PR team. His gestures grew more agitated as he received updates about the social media firestorm and its impact on Montgomery Industries' public image. Terrence Washington, the teacher who had spoken up from economy class, caught Darius's eye and gave him a subtle nod of respect. That simple acknowledgement carried the weight of shared experience, the unspoken understanding between two black men who recognized the courage required to challenge systemic inequity. As Patricia returned from another call, her entire demeanor had transformed. She addressed Darius with genuine respect rather than the forced politeness of customer service. "Mr. Jackson, our executive team, is implementing emergency protocols for this situation. They've authorized me to offer solutions that address both your individual experience and the systemic issues it represents." Darius raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." For the first time since boarding the aircraft, he allowed himself to recognize the magnitude of what was unfolding. What began as yet another microaggression had evolved into a potential watershed moment, one that could create meaningful change if leveraged properly. The choice before him was clear: accept personal compensation and allow the airline to manage the PR crisis, or push for structural changes that might prevent similar incidents in the future. As a corporate attorney, Darius understood both the limitations and possibilities of this inflection point. He thought of his children, of the world they would inherit, and of how many times he had advised clients to settle quietly rather than fight publicly. This time would be different. This time he would use his legal expertise not just for a client, but for something larger than himself. In the airline's Chicago headquarters, the executive conference room had transformed into a crisis command center. The CEO, Timothy Prescott, paced anxiously as his team assembled virtually and in person. Screens displayed social media metrics, stock tickers, and news coverage that grew more damaging by the minute. "Someone give me options." Prescott demanded, his normally composed demeanor cracking under pressure. "Our stock is down 4% and falling. The video has 17 million views and counting." The chief marketing officer spoke first. "We're drafting a statement condemning discrimination and affirming our commitment to diversity." "Generic statements won't cut it," the general counsel interrupted. "This isn't just a PR issue. It's a potential legal nightmare." The passenger involved is Darius Jackson from Wilson Bennett and Associates. He specializes in corporate law and has an impeccable reputation. If he decides to pursue legal action, we're looking at significant liability. Prescott stopped pacing. "Wilson Bennett. Aren't they our outside counsel for the merger negotiations?" One of them, yes, the general counsel confirmed grimly. "And Lawrence Bennett personally represents 2 of our board members." The revelation sent a new wave of panic through the room. This wasn't just any passenger. This was someone deeply connected to the airline's most important relationships. "What about Montgomery?" Prescott asked. "Can we distance ourselves?" The chief revenue officer cleared his throat. "Montgomery Industries books roughly $30 million in business travel with us annually, but their stock is taking an even bigger hit than ours. Down 7% and still dropping. Their board is in emergency session right now." On the screens, fresh headlines appeared: "CEO caught on camera racism in first class," and "Montgomery Industries faces boycott calls after viral video." Prescott's phone buzzed with a text from the chairwoman of the board: "Fix this now." Meanwhile, inside the aircraft, Montgomery was experiencing his own corporate meltdown. His executive assistant handed him a tablet displaying an email from Montgomery Industries' board of directors. His face paled as he read their unanimous decision he was being placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation. "This is absurd," he muttered, scrolling through the document. "They can't do this. I built this company." His assistant avoided eye contact. "Sir, PR says number boycott Montgomery is trending nationwide. Our biggest clients are issuing statements distancing themselves from us." The board felt they had no choice. Montgomery's gaze darted to where Darius sat calmly, reviewing documents seemingly unbothered by the chaos swirling around him. The contrast between them couldn't have been starker. One man imploding under the weight of his own prejudice, the other rising with quiet dignity. Outside the aircraft, reporters had begun gathering at the gate, alerted by the viral story. Passengers disembarking from other flights paused to film the scene, adding to the digital documentation of the incident. Darius's phone rang again. This time, it was the airline's general counsel himself, Jonathan Weber. "Mr. Jackson, I hope you'll accept my personal apologies for this inexcusable situation," Weber began. "We'd like to offer immediate compensation and assurances that those involved will face appropriate consequences." Darius's response was measured. "Mr. Weber, as I'm sure you're aware, this incident reflects systemic issues rather than individual failings. While I appreciate the offer, I'm more interested in structural changes that prevent such occurrences for all passengers." Weber's voice betrayed his anxiety. "Of course. We're prepared to discuss comprehensive solutions. Perhaps we could arrange a private meeting after your arrival in New York." "I think transparency serves everyone's interests at this point," Darius replied. "Any resolution should be public, given the public nature of the discrimination." The conversation ended with Weber's reluctant agreement to Darius's terms. No sooner had he hung up than texts flooded in from Amara. "You're all over the news. Are you okay? Maya saw a clip on TikTok and recognized you. She says you're her superhero. I'm coming to the airport. Love you and so proud of you." That last message caused Darius's carefully maintained composure to crack slightly. Throughout his career, he had deliberately avoided becoming the face of racial issues, preferring to effect change quietly through corporate policy and legal precedent. Now thrust into the spotlight, he felt both the weight and opportunity of the moment. A notification from his news app showed Montgomery Industries stock continuing its precipitous decline. Financial analysts were already speculating about long-term damage to the company's value and reputation. What had begun as one man's entitlement had escalated into a corporate crisis that would likely cost shareholders millions. Patricia returned to Darius's seat, her manner now deferential. "Mr. Jackson, our CEO, has authorized me to implement any measures you deem appropriate to resolve this situation. We're prepared to address both your personal experience and the broader issues it represents." Before Darius could respond, Montgomery approached his earlier arrogance, replaced by desperation. "Look, this has gotten completely out of hand. I'm willing to offer a private settlement to put this matter behind us." "Name your price." Patricia stepped between them. "Mr. Montgomery I must ask you to return to your seat. Our airline does not condone attempts to privatize what is clearly a matter of public concern." Montgomery's face registered shock at being rebuffed by someone who would have catered to his every whim just hours earlier. The power shift was complete and undeniable. As Montgomery retreated, Darius made a decision. This moment called for more than personal compensation or an individual victory. It demanded a response that would create lasting change. He began drafting notes on his tablet, outlining specific policy recommendations, training requirements, and accountability measures. When Amara arrived, she would help refine these ideas into a comprehensive proposal that addressed the root causes rather than merely treating symptoms. The flight remained grounded, but Darius Jackson was soaring, lifted by the opportunity to transform an act of discrimination into a catalyst for meaningful reform. Amara Jackson strode purposefully through O'Hare International Airport, her tailored pantsuit and confident gait causing travelers to instinctively make way. At 42, with 15 years of experience as a crisis management consultant, she recognized this moment as both a personal injustice against her husband and a strategic opportunity for institutional change. Behind her walked Janelle Cooper and Michael Townsend, junior associates from Darius's firm, who had dropped everything to provide legal support. Each carried leather portfolios containing precedent-setting cases involving airline discrimination. Security personnel, already briefed about the situation, expedited their path to the gate. As they approached, Amara could see a crowd had gathered, a mix of journalists, curious travelers, and airline representatives attempting to maintain order. Meanwhile, inside the aircraft, Darius had transformed his first-class seat into a makeshift war room. His methodical legal mind approached the situation with the same precision he applied to high-stakes corporate cases. On his tablet, he documented every interaction statement and response since the confrontation began, creating a detailed timeline that would withstand legal scrutiny. Mr. Jackson, Regina approached with a bottle of water. "Can I get you anything else while you wait?" "No, thank you," Darius replied, noting this interaction in his documentation. The changes in how staff addressed him, from initially questioning his presence in first class to now treating him with deference, provided its own evidence of the biases at play. His phone rang. Lawrence Bennett was calling again. "Darius, I've been speaking with our contacts at the National Bar Association and the ACLU. They're ready to support whatever approach you choose. This could be a landmark case if you decide to pursue litigation." Darius considered his options carefully. "I'm not interested in personal damages, Lawrence. This needs to be about systemic change." "Understood. What's your strategy?" "I'm drafting a comprehensive policy proposal for the airline. Amara's on her way with additional resources. If they accept meaningful reforms, I'm willing to work with them rather than against them." Lawrence's approval came through in his voice. "Smart approach. A public partnership looks better for everyone than protracted litigation. but we should be prepared for both paths." As they discussed specifics, Darius noticed a growing crowd of supporters outside the aircraft. Through the window, he could see law students from Northwestern University who had arrived carrying signs reading "First-class citizens deserve first-class treatment and end travel while black discrimination." Inside the plane, the atmosphere had transformed. Passengers who had initially remained silent were now openly discussing their observations. Many approached Darius to offer their contact information as potential witnesses. "Sir," a young woman said, "I've been recording since Mr. Montgomery first came on board. I caught everything he said about your own people. I'm a journalism student and I'd be happy to provide the unedited footage." Terrence Washington had moved from economy to sit in an empty first-class seat beside Darius, with the flight attendants making no effort to return him to his assigned seat. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "Brother, what you're doing isn't just for yourself," Terrence said quietly. "I've been flying for business for 20 years, and the indignities never stop. The extra random screenings, the questions about my first-class tickets, the flight attendants who watch me more closely than white passengers. Maybe this time, something actually changes." Darius nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. His personal victory would mean little if it didn't create a path for others. When Amara arrived at the aircraft door, her presence immediately commanded attention. Patricia Davis hurried to greet her. "Mrs. Jackson, I'm Patricia Davis, Regional Manager. We're working diligently to resolve this situation." Amara's response was cool and professional. "I understand my husband has already outlined his conditions for resolution. We're here to formalize those terms." As Amara boarded, the passengers broke into spontaneous applause. She moved down the aisle with dignity, nodding in acknowledgement before taking the seat beside Darius. "You've caused quite a stir," she murmured, squeezing his hand briefly. "Not intentionally," he replied. "Some of the most important changes happen unintentionally." She opened her tablet. "I've drafted a preliminary framework based on your notes. Let's refine it before we present it to their executive team." For the next hour, while Montgomery sat isolated and increasingly agitated at the back of first-class, Darius and Amara developed a comprehensive proposal. Their approach was strategic rather than punitive, focusing on measurable outcomes rather than empty promises. When they finished, Darius requested a meeting with airline representatives in the jet bridge, away from the cameras but still visible enough to maintain transparency. Patricia quickly arranged it, eager to demonstrate the airline's willingness to cooperate. Timothy Prescott himself had arrived at the airport, recognizing that this crisis required the CEO's personal attention. He waited in the jet bridge with Jonathan Weber and the airline's newly appointed Chief Diversity Officer, a position that had existed primarily on paper until this incident forced its activation. As Darius and Amara approached, accompanied by their legal team, Prescott extended his hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, I cannot adequately express my regret for what transpired today." Darius accepted the handshake but moved directly to business. "Mr. Prescott, we've developed a framework for addressing both the specific incident and the underlying issues it represents." He handed over a tablet containing their proposal. 1. Immediate implementation of anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, developed in consultation with civil rights experts. 2. Revision of seating policies to prevent discriminatory application. 3. Creation of an independent review board for discrimination complaints. 4. Quarterly public reporting of diversity metrics and incident resolution. 5. Financial commitment to organizations promoting equality in transportation. 6. Development of clear protocols preventing staff from becoming unwilling participants in discriminatory requests from other passengers. Prescott reviewed the document, his expression shifting from apprehension to cautious relief. The proposal was firm but fair, focused on improvement rather than punishment. "These are reasonable measures," he acknowledged. "Some are already in development, though clearly not implemented effectively. Implementation and accountability are key, Amara noted, which is why public reporting is non-negotiable. Weber, the general counsel, began to object. Public reporting creates potential liability. The liability exists whether reported or not, Darius interrupted. Transparency creates incentives for genuine improvement rather than cosmetic changes. Prescott held up his hand to silence Weber's objection. We accept these terms, all of them. I'd like to propose an additional step. Would you consider serving as a special advisor to our board on these initiatives? Your expertise would be invaluable in ensuring meaningful implementation. The offer was unexpected but strategic. By incorporating Darius into the solution, the airline would transform a potential adversary into a partner. For Darius, it provided a mechanism to ensure the promised changes materialized, rather than fading once the media attention diminished. I'd be willing to serve in that capacity. Darius agreed with the understanding that I'll maintain independence and speak publicly if commitments aren't met. With the framework established, they returned to the aircraft to inform the passengers of the resolution. As Darius moved through first class, he passed Montgomery, who sat staring at his phone watching his company's stock price continue its downward trajectory. Their eyes met briefly. Montgomery looked away first. The jet bridge meeting concluded. Darius and Timothy Prescott re-entered the aircraft together, followed by Amara and the airline executives. Their unified front immediately signaled to passengers that a resolution had been reached. The cabin, which had been buzzing with conversation, fell silent as Prescott approached the front galley. Bradley handed him the intercom phone with a deference that bordered on obsequiousness. Prescott cleared his throat before addressing the entire aircraft. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Timothy Prescott, Chief Executive Officer of Transcontinental Airlines. I want to personally apologize for the unacceptable situation that occurred on this flight today. What Mr. Jackson experienced represents a failure of our values and policies. The CEO paused, making eye contact with passengers throughout the cabin before continuing. Effective immediately, we are implementing comprehensive anti-discrimination measures developed in consultation with Mr. Jackson, who has graciously agreed to advise our board on these initiatives. These include mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, revised seating policies, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, and public reporting of our progress. The announcement was met with approving nods from passengers. Zoe Williams continued filming, ensuring that the airline's public commitment would be documented and distributed. Additionally, Prescott continued all passengers on today's flight will receive full refunds and vouchers for future travel as a small acknowledgement of the inconvenience caused by our failure. While the vouchers cannot compensate for the experience, we hope they demonstrate our commitment to doing better. From his seat in the back of first class, Montgomery watched the proceedings with mounting alarm. His assistant leaned over to whisper urgently in his ear, showing him a notification on her tablet. The Montgomery Industries Board had called an emergency press conference for 5 o'clock. Montgomery rose abruptly, attempting to exit the aircraft without further public embarrassment. As he moved toward the door, a corporate security team waiting in the jet bridge met him. Their purpose was clear. Montgomery Industries was managing their own crisis by removing their CEO from public view. Mr. Montgomery, one security officer, said quietly, "The board has arranged private transportation for you. Please come with us." The assembled passengers watched as Montgomery was escorted away, his corporate downfall as public as his discriminatory behavior had been. Prescott returned the intercom phone to Bradley before personally approaching Darius and Amara. "Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, we've arranged a private aircraft to ensure you reach New York in time for tomorrow's hearing. It's waiting at our executive terminal whenever you're ready to depart." Darius considered the offer. "Thank you, but I prefer to fly with the other passengers. Redirecting a private jet seems wasteful when there's a perfectly good commercial flight available." Prescott nodded, understanding the symbolic importance of Darius's decision. "Of course, we'll depart as soon as possible." As the CEO moved toward the exit, Regina approached Darius one final time. "Mr. Jackson, I want to thank you," she said, her voice carrying genuine emotion. "For 15 years, I've watched incidents like this happen and felt powerless to stop them. What you did today doesn't just help passengers. It helps crew members who want to do the right thing but fear for their jobs." Throughout the cabin, similar sentiments were expressed by other staff members. Bradley, who had initially enabled Montgomery's behavior, now stood uncomfortably in the galley facing the consequences of his choices. The hierarchy that had seemed so rigid hours earlier had revealed its fragility when confronted with principled resistance. Outside the aircraft, news crews had gathered at the windows overlooking the gate area. The story had transcended social media to become national news, with legal analysts already discussing the potential precedent-setting implications. As preparations for departure resumed, passengers from economy class approached Darius one by one, expressing support and sharing their own experiences with travel discrimination. What began as one-man stand had catalyzed a broader conversation about dignity, respect, and equal treatment. Terrence Washington, the teacher who had spoken up from economy, stopped by Darius's seat. "My students won't believe I witnessed this. Would you mind if I shared your story in my social studies class? It's a powerful example of standing up for your rights." "I'd be honored," Darius replied. "Perhaps we could arrange a virtual classroom visit sometime." The offer brought a wide smile to Terrence's face. "That would be incredible. These kids need to see examples of professional success coupled with moral courage." As passengers returned to their seats for departure, Darius checked his phone one last time. News alerts showed Montgomery Industries stock had stabilized following the announcement of Walter Montgomery's temporary leave of absence corporate language for what would likely become a permanent separation. The company had appointed its first black executive, Dr. Elaine Robinson, as interim CEO, with a commitment to reviewing all company policies regarding diversity and inclusion. The transformation extended beyond Montgomery Industries. Social media was flooded with accounts from travelers sharing similar experiences, creating a nationwide conversation about traveling while black and the cumulative impact of such discrimination. Major airlines were issuing statements about their own anti-bias policies, attempting to distance themselves from Transcontinental's public relations disaster. Captain Reynolds, who had initially supported Montgomery's demands, made no further appearances in the cabin. A first officer had taken over the pre-departure announcements, suggesting that the captain's role in the incident was under review. As the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, nearly 3 hours behind schedule, Darius felt the weight of the day's events. What had begun as a routine business trip had transformed into something far more significant, a visible challenge to the everyday indignities that persisted despite laws prohibiting such discrimination. Amara squeezed his hand as the engines roared to life. "You know this is just the beginning," she said. Darius nodded. The hard work of ensuring that promises led to actual change still lay ahead. But for now, as the aircraft lifted into the evening sky, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Sometimes justice required standing your ground even when every system was designed to make you move. 1 year later, Darius Jackson stood at the podium in Transcontinental Airlines corporate headquarters, addressing the assembled board members, executives, and media representatives. Behind him, a screen displayed impressive statistics: complaints of discriminatory treatment down 78%, employee satisfaction up 35%, and customer loyalty metrics reaching record highs. "Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the Jackson Initiative," Darius stated, using the name that Transcontinental had given to their anti-discrimination program. "The progress has been significant, but our work is far from complete." In the audience, Timothy Prescott nodded in agreement. The CEO had staked his reputation on meaningful reform, and the results had exceeded expectations. Transcontinental's stock had not only recovered but reached new heights as the airline's commitment to equal treatment became a market differentiator. When I was asked to move from my seat that day, Darius continued, I could not have anticipated how that moment would catalyze industry-wide change. 7 major airlines have now adopted similar anti-bias training and transparency measures. The Department of Transportation has incorporated our reporting metrics into their regulatory framework. What began as a personal stand has become a movement for institutional accountability. After concluding his address, Darius joined Amara for the short drive to their New York apartment. They had relocated from Chicago 6 months earlier, when Darius accepted a position as founding partner at a new civil rights division within his law firm. The division specialized in corporate accountability and institutional reform, leveraging market forces to advance equity. "Did you see who was in the back row?" Amara asked, as their car navigated through Manhattan traffic. Terrence Washington and his students. Darius smiled. He's brought 3 different classes to observe corporate responsibility presentations this year. Those kids idolize you, Amara noted, especially after you helped Terrence establish that scholarship program. The Terrence Washington Future Leaders Scholarship, funded by Transcontinental Airlines as part of their commitment to community investment, supported students from underserved communities pursuing careers in transportation, hospitality, and corporate social responsibility. It represented the tangible outcomes that extended beyond policy changes. Darius's phone chimed with a news alert. Montgomery Industries had been acquired by Jackson Williams Technologies, the very company Darius had successfully defended from Montgomery's attempted hostile takeover the previous year. The poetic justice of the situation wasn't lost on him. Walter Montgomery himself had faded from public view, resurfacing occasionally in minor business ventures, but never regaining his former status. His name had become a case study in business schools, though not in the way he would have wanted a cautionary tale about how personal bias could destroy shareholder value and corporate reputation. As they arrived at their building, the doorman greeted them warmly.
"Mr. Jackson packages arrived for you. I sent them up to your apartment."
Inside their home, Darius found a large box containing advance copies of his book, First Class Citizenship: Confronting Everyday Discrimination. The publisher had pushed for an early release to coincide with his national speaking tour. "They look fantastic," Amara said, examining a copy. "Your mother would have been so proud." The mention of his late mother brought a momentary tightness to Darius's throat. Eliza Jackson had raised him with an unshakable belief in both excellence and equality, the twin pillars that guided his approach to law and life. His phone rang. It was Regina Palmer, the flight attendant, whose initial discomfort with Montgomery's demands had signaled her own moral conflict. "Mr. Jackson, I hope I'm not interrupting," she began. "Not at all, Regina. And please, after a year, I think you can call me Darius." She laughed. "Old habits." "I wanted you to know that I've been promoted to the training division. I'll be helping implement the expanded cultural competency program for new flight attendants." "That's wonderful news," Darius replied sincerely. Regina had become an unexpected ally, using her insider knowledge to identify gaps in the airline's policies and providing honest feedback on proposed changes. After finishing the call, Darius joined Amara in their home office, where Maya and Marcus were completing their homework. At 8 and 11, they had absorbed the lessons of the past year with the peculiar wisdom of children. "Dad, we're studying civil disobedience in school," Marcus announced. "My teacher used your airplane story as an example." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Really, I'm not sure it qualifies as civil disobedience. I was simply insisting on rights already guaranteed by law." "That's what I said," Marcus exclaimed. "But Miss Thompson said sometimes enforcing existing rights requires acts of courage, just like changing unjust laws." Amara smiled at their son's passion for precise language. So, like his father, she has a point. Laws on paper mean little without people willing to uphold them in practice. Later that evening, as the children slept, Darius and Amara relaxed on their terrace overlooking the city lights. They had received an invitation to a White House symposium on transportation equity, where Darius would share the framework developed with Transcontinental as a potential model for federal regulations. Did you ever imagine that refusing to move from an airplane seat would lead to all this? Amara asked, gesturing toward the stack of speaking invitations on their coffee table. Darius considered the question. What happened that day wasn't really about a seat. It was about dignity, about refusing to accept that some people deserve less respect than others based on how they look. And now you're helping rewrite the rules, Amara said proudly. We're rewriting them, Darius corrected, acknowledging her essential role in crafting both the initial response and the ongoing strategy. As they gazed at the city skyline, Darius reflected on the journey from that confrontation in first class to this moment. His legal career had always been focused on corporate interests, protecting businesses, negotiating deals, maximizing shareholder value. Now he had found a way to align those skills with his personal commitment to justice, creating change from within systems rather than merely opposing them from without. The next morning, Darius would board another flight once again in first class, but now as an advisor to the airline rather than merely a passenger. The lessons of that fateful day continued to ripple outward, transforming policies, practices, and perceptions across the industry. What began as one man refusing to surrender his rightful place had catalyzed a movement toward the simple but profound recognition that every passenger, regardless of race, deserved first-class treatment. And in that transformation lay the promise of a more just society, one seat, one policy, one institution at a time. Standing firm against discrimination isn't just about personal dignity. It's about creating systemic change. Darius Jackson's story teaches us that true courage often means refusing to accept injustice even when the easier path beckons. By leveraging his expertise rather than surrendering to intimidation, Darius transformed a moment of discrimination into an opportunity for institutional reform. This story reminds us that change rarely comes from comfortable compromises. It requires individuals willing to withstand pressure, document injustices, and strategically challenge power structures. The most effective advocates understand both the legal frameworks protecting their rights and the tactical advantages of maintaining composure under fire. Perhaps most importantly, Darius demonstrates that advocacy isn't just about personal vindication. By insisting on structural solutions rather than individual compensation, he ensured his victory extended to countless others who might never have the platform or resources to fight similar battles. His approach reminds us that justice achieved privately benefits one person, while justice achieved publicly benefits generations. What situation have you faced where standing your ground created change beyond your individual experience? Share your story in the comments. If Darius's approach inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of courage against discrimination. Don't forget to share with someone who might need this reminder of their own power to create change. Thank you for watching, and remember, dignity isn't given, it's claimed, protected, and extended to others.